The laws of the wild are written in blood and survival, forged over millions of years of evolution into instinctive patterns that govern how animals interact, compete, and organize their social structures. Nowhere are these laws more absolute and brutal than in the territorial dynamics of male lions, where dominance is established and maintained through violence, where challenges to authority are met with savage combat, and where the price of weakness is exile, injury, or death. A pride male who has claimed territory and mating rights with a group of females will defend those privileges ferociously against any rival who dares to encroach, because losing means not just displacement, but often the death of his cubs, killed by the victorious challenger in an act of infanticide that brings the females back into reproductive readiness and ensures that the new dominant male's genetics, not his predecessors, will define the pride's next generation. This brutal system has operated for countless millennia, shaping lion social structure and driving the evolution of male lions into the magnificent, mane-adorned warriors we recognize today. Yet occasionally, nature presents us with exceptions to even its most fundamental rules, moments when individual animals behave in ways that defy the established patterns and force us to look deeper at the complexity of animal consciousness and the role that individual experience and memory can play in shaping behavior. This is the story of one such exception, an incident that unfolded in the Maasai Mara National Reserve in Kenya, and that would challenge everything wildlife experts thought they understood about lion territorial behavior, male competition, and the bonds that can form between individuals even across the supposedly unbridgeable divide of rival males competing for the same resources. The story centers on a magnificent male lion known to researchers as Scar, named for the distinctive mark running down his left cheek, a memento from a battle years earlier that had left him with this permanent identifier that made him instantly recognizable to anyone who studied the Mara's lion populations. Scar was estimated to be approximately 9 years old, which placed him firmly in the mature phase of his life when male lions typically reach their peak power and experience. He had ruled over a pride of 7 adult females and their various offspring for nearly 4 years, an impressive tenure that spoke to his strength, fighting ability, and territorial dominance. During those 4 years, he had successfully defended his territory against multiple challengers, had sired numerous cubs who carried his genetics into the next generation, and had established himself as one of the most successful and formidable males in the region. Wildlife researchers who had been monitoring the Mara's lion populations for decades considered Scar to be a textbook example of a successful pride male displaying all the expected behaviors: aggressive territorial patrols, swift and violent responses to potential rivals, careful monitoring of his pride's movements, and the kind of confident dominance that characterized lions at the peak of their reign. The research team that studied Scar's pride was led by Dr. Catherine Nairobi, a Kenyan wildlife biologist who had dedicated nearly 20 years to understanding lion behavior and social dynamics in the Mara ecosystem. Catherine had known Scar since he first arrived in the territory as part of a coalition of 2 young males, brothers from the same litter who had left their birth pride together and had wandered for months, searching for territory they could claim. She had documented his initial takeover of the pride, had recorded his early battles establishing dominance, and had followed his subsequent reign with the detailed attention that long-term field research requires. In her extensive files on Scar were hundreds of photographs, thousands of behavioral observations, detailed genealogies of his offspring, and comprehensive notes on his interactions with pride members and with rival males who occasionally tested his boundaries. It was Catherine who first noticed the unusual situation developing in late August when a new male lion appeared on the edges of Scar's territory. This newcomer was younger, probably around 6 years old based on his appearance and behavior, and he was moving through the area with the careful, assessing manner of a male looking for opportunity, searching for territory he might be able to claim or for a pride he might challenge for. Catherine and her team, which included 3 research assistants and a visiting graduate student, began monitoring this potential challenger closely, knowing that his presence likely meant conflict was imminent. They had witnessed such scenarios play out dozens of times before. A challenging male would probe the boundaries of established territory, would call out with his roars to announce his presence and test the resident male's response, and eventually, if he felt confident enough, would push deeper into the territory until confrontation became unavoidable. The pattern would then follow its ancient, brutal script. The two males would meet, would size each other up through displays of aggression and intimidation, and if neither backed down, would engage in combat that could last from minutes to over an hour. A terrifying spectacle of violence involving powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, massive paws armed with retractable claws, and hundreds of kilograms of muscle driven by the absolute imperative to win or lose everything. These battles could result in serious injuries or death for either combatant, and even the victor often emerged with wounds that could become infected or that could compromise his ability to hunt or defend territory in the future. The loser, if he survived, would be driven from the territory, often pursued for considerable distances to ensure he understood the consequences of returning, left to wander as a nomad searching for another opportunity, or slowly dying from injuries sustained in the failed challenge. Catherine had documented many such encounters over her years in the Mara, had seen the aftermath of territorial battles in the form of injured or dead males, and had recorded the tragic consequences for cubs when a new male successfully took over a pride and systematically killed all the young sired by his predecessor. It was harsh, brutal, and heartbreaking to witness, but it was also the reality of lion social dynamics, the system that had evolved to maximize reproductive success and ensure genetic diversity in populations. As the new male continued to probe Scar's territory over the following days, Catherine and her team prepared themselves emotionally and logistically for the violent confrontation they expected was coming. They positioned themselves strategically to observe and document the encounter when it occurred, checked their camera equipment, and discussed the ethical protocols they would follow, the circumstances under which they might intervene if injuries became life-threatening versus their general policy of allowing natural processes to unfold without human interference. The confrontation everyone anticipated finally occurred on a late afternoon when the golden light of the approaching sunset bathed the savannah in warm tones that would have been beautiful if not for the tension of what was about to unfold. Scar had been resting with his pride near a waterhole when the challenger appeared approximately 200 meters away, emerging from a line of acacia trees with deliberate, purposeful movement that announced his intentions clearly. The pride's females immediately noticed the intruder, several of them standing and staring in his direction with alert, tense postures. Scar, who had been lying in the shade, rose to his feet with the fluid power of a creature in his prime, his magnificent mane making him appear even larger and more formidable than his already impressive size. Catherine, observing from her vehicle about 100 meters away, raised her camera and began filming, knowing she was about to document another example of the violent territorial dynamics that defined male lion competition. What happened next was so unexpected, so contrary to everything Catherine knew about lion behavior, that she actually lowered her camera briefly to check with her own eyes that what she was seeing through the lens was real and not some trick of the light or her expectations. Scar began walking toward the challenger, which was expected and normal. Male lions don't wait passively for challengers to reach their pride. They move to intercept threats at a distance, positioning themselves between the intruder and their females and cubs. But something about Scar's body language was wrong, was different from the aggressive, threat display posture that should have characterized his approach. His tail wasn't lashing in agitation. His ears weren't flattened back against his skull in the prelude to combat. His approach, while purposeful, lacked the stiff-legged, raised hackle appearance of a male preparing for battle. Even more remarkably, as the distance between the two males closed to about 50 meters, Scar made a vocalization that froze Catherine in shock. It wasn't a roar of challenge or warning. It was a softer sound, a contact call of the type that pride males sometimes make toward their coalition partners or toward pride members they have peaceful relationships with. The challenger stopped at this sound, his own posture shifting from the cautious, tense readiness of an invading male, to something that looked almost like confusion or uncertainty. The two males continued to approach each other, closing the distance to 30 meters, then to 20, and Catherine found herself holding her breath, unable to predict what would happen next because nothing about this encounter was following the expected pattern. At 15 meters, Scar sat down. A pride male, confronted by a challenger to his territory and reproductive rights, sat down in a posture that communicated non-aggression and lack of threat. Catherine heard one of her research assistants make a sound of disbelief, and she understood the reaction because she was feeling the same shock. In her 20 years studying lions, she had never seen anything like this. The challenger, equally confused by Scar's behavior, also sat, mirroring the dominant male's posture in what appeared to be an automatic response to the unexpected social signal. The two males sat there, 15 meters apart, watching each other with an intensity that suggested complex processing was occurring behind those golden eyes, some evaluation or recognition that was preventing the expected violence from erupting. Then Scar did something even more extraordinary. He stood, but instead of assuming an aggressive posture or launching an attack to capitalize on the challenger's confusion, he approached closer. He walked to within 5 meters of the other male, close enough that either could reach the other in a single bound, close enough that this distance should have triggered immediate combat if normal territorial instincts were operating. And at this dangerously close range, with Catherine and her entire team watching in stunned silence, Scar and the challenger engaged in a greeting behavior. They touched noses briefly. They chuffed at each other with those soft vocalizations that signal recognition and peaceful intent. And then, incredibly, they rubbed their heads and sides against each other in the social bonding behavior that lions use to reinforce relationships and spread communal scent among pride members. Catherine's hands were shaking as she photographed and filmed this unprecedented encounter, her mind racing to understand what she was witnessing. This wasn't just an absence of expected aggression. This was positive social bonding between two adult males who should have been mortal rivals, who by all the rules of lion behavior should have been engaged in savage combat at this very moment. The interaction continued for several minutes, the two males circling each other slowly, occasionally touching, vocalizing softly, displaying body language that communicated comfort and familiarity rather than the tension and aggression that should have characterized a territorial challenge. Eventually, Scar turned and began walking back toward his pride, and the challenger, after a brief hesitation, followed him. They walked together side by side, returning to where the pride's females waited in obvious confusion, their own expectations of violence and disruption completely overturned by the peaceful reunion they were witnessing instead. Catherine immediately radioed to other researchers in the area, reporting what she had just observed, and requesting that anyone with historical data on these two specific males share their records. Over the next several hours, as Catherine continued to observe the two males resting peacefully together near the pride, as the females gradually relaxed and accepted the newcomer's presence, Catherine began receiving responses from colleagues who had worked in different areas of the Mara ecosystem. And slowly, through the collaborative sharing of photographic records, identification files, and field notes, a story began to emerge that explained the impossible reunion Catherine had just witnessed. The challenger, who Catherine's team began calling Nomad based on his recent wandering behavior, was not a stranger to Scar. The two males were, in fact, brothers from the same litter, born 9 years earlier in a pride located about 40 kilometers from Scar's current territory. Catherine found photographs from other researchers showing both males as cubs, their distinctive markings already present even in infancy, and allowing definitive identification. The brothers had remained together through their juvenile years, had been driven from their birth pride together when they reached adolescence, following the normal pattern where young males are expelled to prevent inbreeding and to reduce competition for resources. They had formed a coalition, as brothers often do, and had wandered together as nomads for over a year, hunting cooperatively, defending each other, and searching for territory they could claim. The records showed that approximately 4 years earlier, the brothers had attempted a takeover of a pride in the central Mara region. The attempt had been partially successful, but had resulted in the coalition being split. Scar had ultimately claimed the territory where Catherine had been studying him, while Nomad had been driven off by an older, more experienced male who had arrived to challenge for the same prize. The brothers had been separated by this conflict, each going his own way in the vast Mara landscape, and apparently had not encountered each other in the 4 years since. Catherine felt a sense of wonder as she pieced together this history, realizing that what she had witnessed was a reunion between brothers who had been separated for 4 years, who had not seen each other since that violent territorial dispute had driven them apart, but who had recognized each other immediately when they finally met again. The implications were profound and challenged several assumptions about lion cognition and memory. First, it demonstrated that lions could recognize specific individuals even after years of separation, suggesting that their social memory was far more sophisticated and durable than many researchers had appreciated. Second, it showed that bonds formed early in life, particularly between coalition partners who were siblings, could override the normal territorial and competitive instincts that governed male-lion interactions. Third, it raised fascinating questions about the mechanisms of recognition. How had Scar and Nomad identified each other? Was it through scent, which in lions is highly individual and might remain recognizable even after years? Was it through visual recognition of distinctive markings or body proportions? Was it through vocal recognition, with each male's roar having unique characteristics that the other remembered? Or was it some combination of all these factors processed by a brain capable of more sophisticated integration of information than traditional models of animal cognition suggested? Over the following days and weeks, Catherine maintained intensive observation of this unprecedented situation. Nomad was integrated into the pride structure, not as a subordinate, but as a co-dominant male-sharing authority with Scar. The two brothers resumed the coalition partnership they had formed years earlier, now bringing to it the maturity and experience they had gained through their years apart. They patrolled territory together, they rested together, they hunted together on the occasions when the pride's coordinated female hunting groups needed support with particularly large or dangerous prey. They displayed none of the tension or competition that should have existed between two mature males sharing access to the same reproductive females. The pride's lionesses, after an initial period of uncertainty, accepted Nomad's presence and integration into their social structure. Catherine documented intricate social dynamics as the pride adjusted to having 2 adult males instead of 1, noting changes in how territory was defended, in how mating opportunities were shared, and in how the males allocated their time and energy across different aspects of pride maintenance. She observed that having 2 males provided significant advantages: more effective territorial defense against outside challengers, better protection for cubs from threats including from other predators like hyenas and leopards, and more consistent pride coverage since one male could rest while the other remained vigilant. The reunion also seemed to have positive effects on both males individually. Scar, who had been showing subtle signs of the stress and physical demands of solitary pride defense, appeared to become more relaxed and energetic with his brother's support. Nomad, who had been a wandering nomad facing an uncertain future of continued searching for territory or risky challenges against established males, now had stability and security as part of a successful pride. Catherine documented what appeared to be genuine affection between the brothers, mutual grooming sessions, synchronized behavior patterns, and preferential resting positions where they would lie in physical contact with each other, maintaining the bond that had apparently persisted in their memories even through 4 years of complete separation. The case attracted significant attention within the wildlife research community when Catherine presented her findings at a major conference on carnivore behavior. Her photographic documentation was extensive and convincing, showing the initial peaceful greeting, the subsequent integration of Nomad into the pride, and the ongoing coalition partnership between the brothers. Her analysis included comparison with the extensive literature on lion coalitions, noting that while brother coalitions were common, they typically formed during adolescence and remained continuous throughout the males' lives. Cases where coalition partners were separated for extended periods and then reunited were essentially undocumented in the scientific literature, making this observation unique and valuable. Catherine's presentation sparked intense discussion about the implications for understanding lion cognition and social memory. Some researchers argued that the case provided compelling evidence that lions possessed long-term episodic memory, the ability to remember specific individuals and past experiences with them across extended time periods. This was a cognitively demanding capability that had been demonstrated in some primate species and in elephants, but that many researchers had been reluctant to attribute to lions based on limited evidence. Others suggested that the recognition might be based on less sophisticated mechanisms, perhaps genetic similarity detection through scent or other chemical signals that allowed the brothers to recognize their kinship without necessarily remembering each other as specific individuals from their shared past. The debate touched on fundamental questions about animal consciousness and subjective experience. When Scar and Nomad greeted each other peacefully instead of fighting, were they experiencing something analogous to human emotions of recognition, joy at reunion, or affection between family members? Or were they simply responding to instinctive recognition of genetic relatedness with behavioral patterns that promoted inclusive fitness by protecting relatives who shared their genes? Catherine argued passionately that while the ultimate evolutionary explanations based on inclusive fitness were certainly valid, they didn't preclude the possibility that lions also had subjective emotional experiences during such reunions. The two levels of explanation, evolutionary function and subjective experience, were not mutually exclusive, and dismissing the possibility of genuine emotion in animals simply because evolutionary explanations existed was a form of unnecessary reductionism that limited our understanding of animal consciousness. The story also resonated beyond academic circles when it was eventually shared with the public through documentary footage and wildlife photography books. Images of the two magnificent males resting peacefully together, their bodies touching in clear affection, challenged popular narratives about lions being simple killing machines driven only by aggression and the drive to reproduce. People around the world responded emotionally to the story of brothers separated by circumstances beyond their control who had managed to find each other again years later, recognizing in this reunion something universal about family bonds and the desire for connection with those we have lost. The story became a powerful tool for conservation messaging, illustrating that lions were complex social beings with rich emotional lives and sophisticated cognitive capabilities, deserving of protection not just as components of ecosystems, but as individuals whose experiences and relationships had inherent value. Catherine continued monitoring Scar and Nomad's coalition for the next 3 years, documenting what became one of the most successful pride structures in the Mara during that period. The brothers successfully defended their territory against multiple challenges, their combined strength making them formidable opponents who deterred most potential rivals from even attempting serious incursions. The pride's reproductive success was exceptional, with high cub survival rates attributed in part to the excellent protection that two devoted males could provide. Catherine documented complex patterns of paternity using genetic analysis of cubs to determine which male had sired which offspring, and found that both brothers reproduced successfully, with the pride's cubs representing a mix of both males' genetics rather than one dominating reproduction at the expense of the other. This finding was itself significant because it demonstrated that the brothers had found a way to share reproductive access without the conflict that usually characterized such situations. Catherine hypothesized that their early bond and their long history together, including the reunion after years of separation, had created a social relationship strong enough to override the typically intense male-male competition for mating opportunities. The brothers appeared to have implicit agreements about sharing mating access, with Catherine documenting patterns that suggested they took turns rather than competing directly. a level of cooperation and restraint that challenged models of male lion behavior based primarily on competition and dominance hierarchies. The coalition between Scar and Nomad lasted until both males reached old age and were eventually displaced by a group of younger challengers, following the natural progression of lion pride dynamics. By that time, both brothers were approximately 12 years old, which was a remarkable lifespan for wild male lions and spoke to the success of their partnership. When they were finally displaced, they left together, departing the territory side by side, just as they had once arrived in it, maintaining their bond even in defeat. Third, it illustrated the danger of oversimplified models of animal behavior that couldn't accommodate individual variation and relationship history. If researchers had approached Scar and Nomad with rigid expectations based solely on theoretical predictions about how territorial male lions should behave, they might have dismissed or misinterpreted the reunion, forcing it into inappropriate explanatory frameworks rather than recognizing it as evidence that their models needed revision. Fourth, the case emphasized the importance of remaining open to being surprised by animal behavior, of maintaining the intellectual humility to recognize that wild animals could behave in ways that challenged our assumptions and revealed capabilities we hadn't previously appreciated. Catherine often reflected on the moment when she first saw Scar sit down instead of attacking the approaching challenger. That instant when her expectations were so completely overturned that she had to question whether she was really seeing what appeared to be happening. That moment had become for her a symbol of what made field research both challenging and rewarding. The constant tension between the theoretical knowledge and expectations researchers brought to their observations and the actual behavior of individual animals who sometimes followed the predicted patterns and sometimes did things that demanded entirely new ways of understanding. The reunion of Scar and Nomad had been one of those moments that demanded new understanding, and the years Catherine had spent documenting and analyzing their coalition had enriched not just the scientific literature but her own appreciation for the complexity and wonder of the animals she had dedicated her life to studying and protecting. The question posed at the beginning of this story was, why did the pride leader refuse to fight the intruder, and what was the secret that came out? The answer, revealed through careful research and historical reconstruction, was that the intruder was not a stranger, but a brother, that the two males shared a bond formed in their earliest months of life and strengthened through their time as coalition partners, and that this bond had survived 4 years of complete separation across a vast landscape. The secret was that beneath the violent competition that typically characterized male-lion interactions was a capacity for recognition and reunion, for loyalty and affection that could override territorial instincts when the individuals involved shared history and kinship significant enough to activate different behavioral programs. Scar's refusal to fight Nomad was not weakness or confusion or failure of instinct. It was recognition that this was not a rival to be defeated, but a brother to be welcomed home, a companion from the past who belonged at his side rather than being driven away. That recognition and the peaceful reunion and successful coalition it enabled demonstrated that lions possessed social memories, cognitive sophistication, and emotional bonds far richer than simplified narratives about their behavior acknowledged. It reminded everyone who learned their story that the animals we study are individuals with histories that matter to them, with relationships that shape their behavior in ways that transcend simple evolutionary programming, and with inner lives that, while certainly different from human consciousness, nonetheless include elements we can recognize and respect: memory, recognition, loyalty, and the capacity for bonds that time and distance cannot entirely break. The legacy of Scar and Nomad lives on in the scientific literature that documents their exceptional coalition, in the conservation policies informed by understanding the importance of maintaining social bonds in lion populations, in the many students and researchers inspired by their story to look deeper at animal behavior and to question assumptions about the limits of animal cognition and emotion, and in the hearts of everyone who heard about two brothers who found each other again after years lost and who chose peace and reunion over the violence that every expectation said should have occurred. Their story stands as a testament to the complexity and beauty of the natural world, to the power of bonds formed in early life to shape behavior across an entire lifetime, and to the humbling reality that the animals we share this earth with possess capabilities and experiences we are only beginning to understand and appreciate.